the Holy One, who called you. Be holy yourselves. Now look at what Peter says, in all of your behavior. Holy in all of your being, holy in all of your doing, holy in your living. Holiness, again, I want to say this, I'm going to say this 1,000 times, isn't just what you're not. The holiness that God is after is who you are at all times. Right? Like you can be the person that watches no rated R movies. You don't do all of these things, but if you don't have the fruit of the Spirit, you're just religious and there's no power. It's not holiness. Holiness reflects Jesus. If you're rude to people, it's not holiness. If you're too good for people, it's not holiness. If you don't have time for the poor, it's not holiness. Do you know that there was nobody more consecrated in the Gospels than the Pharisees? Nobody had more restrictions on their lifestyle than the Pharisees. You could even argue, nobody studied the Torah more than the Pharisees. Nobody was more structured in their prayer life than the Pharisees. Nobody fasted more than the Pharisees, but they weren't holy. I want to give the other side of holiness that I think we're missing out on, but I want to say this. I believe in fasting and cutting things out of your life. I've done that. I'm seeking those things. But what I want to say is if all you have is the cutting out, but you don't live a holy life, you're merely religious or just moral at best. And I think, to be quite honest, and we'll get into this a little bit later, we have been so moved by a spirit of elitism that sometimes our holiness preaching is really just us charading ourselves before men because Jesus isn't enough. Okay. All right. I know you're stressed out. It's 8:30 and I'm coming up and you're like, oh God. It's a quick teaching. We're going to talk about the rise and fall of harlot Babylon. No, I'm just kidding. All the weird people are like, yes. Jacob and I were texting. It's like, what if I just did a message on spiritual warfare, but all I did was play videos of Hulk Hogan wrestling people? Like, it's like his greatest matches, but I tied it all into spiritual warfare. That would be the best church service I've ever been a part of, ever. Okay. I really don't want to go long tonight. That was amazing, wasn't it? I love when the Lord just moves like that. And actually, one thing I thought was awesome. It's one of the things I was feeling, even as I was praying for tonight, is that verse about the Lord restoring the joy of our salvation. And it's something I've been feeling for a little while. I think for a lot of us, I don't know, maybe for myself, I think if we're honest, I think you get to this place, and maybe some of us are there, where maybe we had lost that joy of salvation. And I've been really convicted about that even recently, even rereading the book of Malachi, when the Lord is dealing with the Levites in the day of Malachi. And one of the, not accusations, one of the pastoral, what's the phrase that I'm thinking? Not accusation, not judgment, but rebuke, correction. That the Lord brings to the Levites is that ministry to the Lord simply became a job description, right? Like ministry to the Lord, coming to be with the Lord, the things we do for the Lord simply became a job description and a burden. I was just rereading through that book, and it's amazing how God is not satisfied when our worship or our obedience or us showing up is merely our job description. And really, I think it magnifies the reality that God isn't after our service as much as he's after our hearts, right? And I think we got to come back to that. And I've been thinking about this. I was actually thinking about this during worship in the beginning. Like, God forbid we enjoy Christianity. I think sometimes the way that we preach, I'm guilty of it, the things that we say, to be quite honest, I don't know how much I like the Christianity that I preach sometimes as much as I love the Christianity that Jesus talks about. right? And I'll just be quite honest. Like, I've even just coming out of this season, we just came out of a really, really hard season. And when you come out of hard seasons, there's two choices. Either you become jaded and bitter, but you don't become jaded and bitter, but you have to take inventory of your life. And I really just started taking inventory of my walk with the Lord, and I realized, man, I have mostly been discouraged in my walk with God. And I realized 100% of it isn't the Lord. I've been living under this intense pressure to perform that in my mind was the Lord, but it really wasn't the Lord. And if we were honest and we really did some inventory of our hearts, most of the heaviness, most of the discouragement that most of you are walking through is because you have more faith in the accuser of the brethren than you have in Jesus. And I really started realizing that in this last season. I realized that the Lord drawing near to love me wasn't enough. And it's crazy, like I have faith for like money. I've got faith for like wild, extravagant things, whatever. I've got faith for like Saudi Arabia. But I realized I don't have a lot of faith for God's personal love for me. Like if we were honest, I think a lot of us, we would say, yeah, I'm there. I've got faith for like corporate breakthrough. Well, of course God's gonna come. There's 1,000 people in the room singing and shouting. And I realized like, man, I've spent so much time in my walk with the Lord, and we call it radical, but really it's me begging God to like me. Doing everything I can, figuring what else can I kill? What else can I cut off? What else can I do? And it's always, I'm not doing enough, Lord. I'm not doing enough, Lord. And then I just finally realized the Lord's like, when are you going to let me lead this? You're going to wear yourself out. And so tonight, I want to give maybe more of a pastoral-ish kind of message on holiness, but not what you think. I want to talk about being holy. Being holy. So let's go to 1 Peter chapter 1. Para los que hablan español, primero Pedro. No, okay, 1 Peter chapter 1. Now, let me throw out some thoughts to you. Tonight is a teaching, but some of it is some of the wrestling of my heart that I've been in that I want to invite you guys into. So let me throw out this thought. Often, when we think of holiness or being holy, usually the first thing that comes into our minds are the things that we don't do. I would say, let's just be honest, most of our messages on consecration or holiness are all about cutting things out of our lives, right? Like that's what we do. You struggle with, now, let me give a couple of prefaces before I get into this message, because I realize with like 20-year-olds you have to do that. I believe in consecration. I believe in cutting things out of your life. I've done it. I've done it more than ye all, some of you. So I don't want to get to the end of the message. You're like, Brother Jose is telling me I just gotta like take everything, and that's not what I'm saying. I want to give the other side of holiness that I think we're missing out on, but I want to say this. I believe in fasting and cutting things out of your life. I've done that. I'm seeking those things. But what I want to say is if all you have is the cutting out, but you don't live a holy life, you're merely religious or just moral at best. And I think, to be quite honest, and we'll get into this a little bit later, we have been so moved by a spirit of elitism that sometimes our holiness preaching is really just us charading ourselves before men because Jesus isn't enough. Like if I was honest, if I look back at my life, 20 years of walking with the Lord, I have done a lot of things in the name of God for the sake of men. Like literally, I think of one practical example. I remember my church was going on a fast back in Florida, 21-day fast, and they wanted everybody to fast one meal a day. But no, 19-year-old Jose was like, this is a lukewarm, backslidden church. You're gonna fast one meal a day. I'm gonna fast everything, water, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to be the loudest, most intense person in prayer. How many of you would say that would be you? Be honest. Well, the Lord knows all of you that lied tonight. Now, I remember sitting there, and I'm like, I'm going to go all in, 21 days, I'm not going to drink anything but water, and maybe I'll even fast water. and I'll never forget, he was my youth pastor, now he's my friend, but he kind of rebuked me. And he told me I was arrogant. And I was offended. I was like, no, I'm not arrogant, I'm just hungry for God. And he's like, no, you're pretty arrogant. It's like, what if you just unified yourself to the body and just did what everyone was doing? But the issue, the core of it, now I thought what was motivating me was love for God, but it wasn't love for God. What was motivating me was I didn't believe God loved me. And I had to do everything I could to be the most extreme person in every given situation, to do everything I could to get God's attention. Most of you are wearing yourselves out, working hard to get God to love you, and he already does, and you don't believe it. You don't have faith for it. You can't fast your way into the love of God. Listen, when you were struggling watching pornography, God loved you. When you got free, his love for you didn't change. The only thing that changed was your capacity to experience that love. But I want us to look at holiness tonight, not just the things we don't do, but really the biblical call of holiness are things we're supposed to be doing, or a way of living. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at this. 1 Peter chapter 1, go to verse 15. Okay, here we go. But like the Holy One who called you, I love that, like the Holy One. You know that God is holy. Do we believe that? What makes God holy is not so much who he's not, but who he is. Like when we talk about the holiness, like think about Tozer's book, The Knowledge of the Holy. It isn't a list of things God is not. Knowledge of the Holy is not a list of things God doesn't do. The study of the holiness of God is a study in who God is and what God does. And to be honest, I think within our movement, I know a lot of what we don't do, and I know a lot of what we're not. I know very little of what we do and what we are. And the truth is, we're probably just not doing much. We'll get to that in a minute. The Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves. And look at what Peter says, in all of your behavior. Holy in all of your being, holy in all of your doing, holy in your living. Holiness, again, I want to say this, I'm probably saying this 1,000 times, isn't just what you're not. The holiness that God is after is who you are at all times. Right? Like you can be the person that watches no rated R movies. You don't do all of these things, but if you don't have the fruit of the Spirit, you're just religious and there's no power. It's not holiness. Holiness reflects Jesus. If you're rude to people, it's not holiness. If you're too good for people, it's not holiness. If you don't have time for the poor, it's not holiness. You know that there was nobody more consecrated in the Gospels than the Pharisees. Nobody had more restrictions on their lifestyle than the Pharisees. You could even argue, nobody studied the Torah more than the Pharisees. Nobody was more structured in their prayer life than the Pharisees. Nobody fasted more than the Pharisees, but they weren't holy. I want you guys to get that tonight. In the Gospels, you have the high priest and you have Jesus. Jesus was the Holy One, the high priest was not. But if we took most of our messages of holiness today, and we just took Jesus' name out, and we just took the character of Caiaphas and the character of Jesus, according to most of our messages, Caiaphas would be walking in holiness and not Jesus. Just take the name out. Forget it's Jesus. Just take a description of their everyday life for 3 years. And you look at the life of Jesus, and you look at the life of Caiaphas, and you compare it to our messages, we would come to the conclusion that Jesus was not holy. But he was the holiest man that ever walked the face of the earth. And very little of his sermons was about what he wasn't doing. But what Jesus was an invitation to being something, to being someone. Holiness is a matter of being, not a matter of not doing. This is what it means to be merely religious or just to be merely moral. Is you have the rituals, you have all the things that you do, but you don't have intimacy. And you don't have love. And you don't have grace. I'll be honest, I've been in this place repenting before the Lord. How much I have compromised because of how much I elevate the gifts of the Spirit. I mean, when was the last time, like think about this. You go to any green room around the world. I've been in green rooms in like 40-something countries. We're always talking about this guy's got the craziest word of knowledge gift, and this guy like flies across the room and like, I don't know, you know. This guy, the Lord takes him to Mars every other week, and he comes back with a sermon. Like, we love that stuff. We're attracted to like these. First of all, it's amazing how we talk about men more than we talk about the Lord. It's amazing how much hero worship has crept into the church. And the reason hero worship has crept into the church is because oftentimes we love the Christianity of our heroes more than we love that of Jesus's. We love the Christianity of the stadium crusades. We don't like the Christianity of tax collector dinners. Right? We love the Christianity of healing crusades, but we don't love the Christianity of like just letting kids come and be with you. I've like come to this place and I realized, man, I like what my movement has cultivated more than I like what Jesus has. Because it's a lot more exciting. And there's a lot more room to share in the glory and to share in the credit. Let's finish the verse. Be holy. In all of your behavior. Not just in what you're not doing, but in everything that you're doing. When you wake up in the morning, how you speak to your roommates, how you speak to your spouse, that is a matter of holiness. This might sound simple. Are you on top of paying your rent on time? I don't care if you went to Reese House till 5 a.m. Do you know that that's not one of the fruit of the Spirit? Do you know that prayer is not a fruit of the Spirit? Did you hear me? Do you know that fasting isn't a fruit of the Spirit? Now, we love these things. Do you know that working miracles is not a fruit of this? In other words, the proof that the Holy Spirit is actively working in your life, praying in tongues and doing miracles is not one of them. Love is one of them. Joy is one of them. Peace is like long-suffering, God forbid. Patience. How about this one? Kindness. When was the last time you went to a training seminar on kindness? It's not sexy enough, but it's proof that you're walking holy.